3062 beings of darkness. Nothing could consume everything. But true darkness, it seemed, was especially susceptible to nothingness, more so than even to light. When exposed to Nef's pure radiance, darkness simply retreated, but when coming into contact with the power of annulment that Saint had summoned, it was directly destroyed. Erased from existence, as if it had never been there at all. Which posed a question: how had Nether been able to rule both true darkness and nothingness, to begin with? Sunny had no answer, but then again, the prince of the underworld had been a demon. And demons were known to accomplish impossible feats. In fact, among all the demons, the demon of destiny seemed to have been the most inventive and ingenious, mastering all kinds of sorcery and adapting it to his needs. Weaver had been a schemer, Ariel had been aka Eater of Secrets, Hope had been a teacher. But Nether had been an inventor, accomplishing numerous wondrous things in pursuit of his designs, all culminating in the creation of the Stone Saints. So was there really a need to feel surprised that he had ignored the inherent conflict between true darkness and nothingness, making both elements submit to his rule? And if Nether could, why wouldn't one of his children be capable of doing the same? As the stone shards of the first Dark One to have entered the field of annulment scattered across the cracked floor of the vast chamber, the rest of them seemed to hesitate, halting at the invisible boundary. But Saint denied them time to adapt to the rapidly shifting current of the battlefield. She dashed forward, plunging several more abominations into the area of denial. They crumbled into stone shards mere seconds later. By then, the rest of the Dark Ones had already retreated, wary of the vestige of nothingness contained within Saint. Naturally, they weren't going to get far. While vast, the stone chamber wasn't endless, and with how quickly Saint could move, avoiding her for more than a handful of moments was not an option. As Sunny saw it, the Dark Ones had two choices now. They could either abandon their morbid shells and retreat or be destroyed. At first, it seemed like they had chosen the former. Saint had only managed to destroy a few more abominations, filling the chamber with the sound of falling rocks, when the rest of them suddenly froze. Then, the towering stone monstrosities all collapsed at the same time, despite not being caught in the field of annulment just yet. They simply fell lifelessly, the jagged pieces of fallen stone saints that composed their lumbering bodies losing cohesion and scattering in all directions. They are retreating, after all. Sunny let out a relieved sigh. Encountering a new kind of adversary was always a tense experience, and he was happy to have escaped the first confrontation against the creatures of darkness relatively unscathed. Not only that, but he seemed to have discovered a powerful weapon against those of their eerie kind that awaited in the depths of the underworld. However, his relief had been premature. Just a moment after the jigsaw abominations crumbled, the innumerable pieces of rock that had scattered across the floor moved once again, just as they had at the beginning of the battle. Only, this time, they weren't assembling into countless frightening figures. Instead, they were being pulled into the depths of the chamber, rapidly congregating at a single point, as if drawn into the orbit of an invisible dark star. At that moment, Sunny realized that, possibly, he had the wrong idea about this battle from the very start. Saint froze for a moment, raising her head to look up. Considering her towering height, it took something truly enormous to make her crane. Her neck, out there in front of her, innumerable stone shards, the shattered remains of her fallen kin that had been used to create impenetrable shells for the Dark Ones, were assembling into a single, colossal figure. The creature was so enormous that its head scratched the ceiling of the great chamber. It had lost all resemblance to a human, as well, or rather, to a stone saint. Instead of the familiar form with 2 legs and 2 arms, a disjointed mass of rock loomed above the taciturn shadow in the darkness, dozens of misshapen limbs protruding from its heavily armored body. It looked eerie and threatening, utterly alien to anything Sunny knew. He felt a grim premonition. Perhaps, there had never been a swarm of Dark Ones attacking them. He had assumed that there were numerous creatures of darkness around them based on his experience dealing with people and abominations, but true darkness was different from both, foreign to this world. Perhaps there had always been only one creature, one consciousness, one malevolent will opposing them. If so, then the Dark Ones they thought they destroyed had never been killed. Instead, they simply dispelled a few minor pieces of that vast, unknowable being. Damn it, just a heartbeat later, a gargantuan stone horror was complete, dwarfing Saint despite her towering, 10-meter-tall figure. In front of the giant assembled from innumerable corpses of her kin, Saint looked like a mouse facing an elephant. Whatever an elephant was, everything seemed to freeze for a moment. Then, the colossal horror moved Foji Ward in an explosion of violent motion, bringing down its unfathomable weight on the graceful stone knight. Saint moved, as well. Having abandoned her usual cold indifference in favor of dark and dreadful wrath, she took a step forward and tossed her round shield forward like a discus. Her shield tore through the air, annihilating it, causing a deafening thunderclap to shake the walls of the fractured chamber. The field of annulment moved with it, narrowing to fit its form. In the blink of an eye, Saint's shield reached the neck of the gargantuan nightmare creature, and tore through it, pulverizing innumerable tons of mystical stone in a blinding flash. The creature's vast neck exploded into a cloud of stone dust. Its head fractured and crumbled, as well. Even its gargantuan body came undone, turning into a devastating avalanche of stone debris. That avalanche collided with the flow G of the chamber with the fury of a natural disaster. And, finally unable to endure the abuse of titanic forces, the floor of the chamber fractured and collapsed with a deafening roar. Oh, crap! Suddenly losing her footing, Saint was pulled into a bottomless abyss of true darkness by a flood of stone debris. 3063 into the darkness. The floor of the chamber shattered, pulling Saint into the boundless darkness below. Everything happened so fast that even her impossibly swift reflexes weren't enough to react, not that she could have done anything otherwise. Saint was a master of warfare and excelled in all types of combat. However, there were still things she wasn't capable of, and one of them was flying. As countless tons of shattered stone plummeted into the abyssal chasm below the vast chamber, she fell as well, pulled down by her immense weight. Sunny and Nephis fell with her. The Hollow Mountains had earned that name because they were hollow on the inside, drowning in elemental darkness. The entrance they had used was at the very pinnacle of one such mountain, and the ancient battlefield must have been located immediately above the great void of its empty interior, the last place where a besieging army could have been stopped. Now, the last obstacle had been broken, and they fell into the depths of the underworld. Even after surviving myriad calamities, Sunny still felt a cold sense of panicked alarm take hold of his mind, even if it was only for a moment. Then, he forced that feeling down and regained his composure. The mountain they had entered was not the tallest mountain of the vast mountain range by far, and yet, it was still taller than the highest peaks of Earth, easily surpassing 10 kilometers in height. It was to the point that anyone below transcendent rank would find it difficult to breathe while nearing its pinnacle. So, now, Saint was facing a 10-kilometer drop, with nothing around her to arrest her fall and no indication of what waited for her at the bottom of the enormous cavern, if the interior of the mountain could even be called that. That was troublesome in and of itself, but the peril of falling from such height paled in comparison to the true threat, the fact that they were plummeting into the depths of the underworld, surrounded by an endless expanse of true darkness and all the horrors that could be dwelling in its cold embrace. Troublesome. The fall itself was not a problem. Nephis could summon her wings, and once she illuminated the world with her radiance, Sunny could use shadow manifestation to do the same. However, there was no need to go so far, yet. Even if Saint could not fly, she had her own ways of handling this fall. She could turn into a torrent of elemental darkness, for example, rushing down unscathed. Alternatively, she could use the power of nothingness instead. That was what she chose to do, swiftly reducing her weight to that of a feather. A moment later, she wasn't falling anymore and seemed to be hovering in the air. In truth, she was gliding downward at an infinitely low speed, supported by air resistance. The immediate crisis had been resolved, but Saint was still in a precarious position. That was because, as the debris of the crushed floor of the gateway chamber disappeared into the darkness, taking the last traces of the ancient battle with them, a thunderous groan resounded from above. It echoed in the boundless darkness, making Saint look up. The ferocious white flames burning beneath the visor of her helmet blazed as she saw the roof of the destroyed chamber fracturing, enormous slabs of stone breaking away and crashing down in clouds of dust. The entire peak of the mountain seemed to be collapsing, falling right on her head. Sunny was not particularly worried about the weight of the mountain's pinnacle. A Supreme would not be heavily damaged even if buried under it, but he had a strong suspicion that the creature of darkness that they had encountered did not particularly care about what kind of stone it used to create a shell. Whether it were the shards of fallen stone saints or the fragments of the mountain itself, it could still form a new body, one even larger and more difficult to destroy than the Colossus Saint had beheaded earlier. A split second after Sunny gave the command, Saint increased her mass to the original prodigious value, plummeting down like a meteor weighing hundreds of tons. That weight plus a constant acceleration while falling from a height of 10 kilometers or more. Sunny did not want to imagine how violent that impact would be. With some luck, he was not going to find out. As Saint fell, the boundless expanse of true darkness embraced her like a cold sea, its invisible currents moving around her in a ghostly maelstrom. The walls of the hollow mountain were getting further and further away, making it seem like she was falling through an infinite abyss. Devoid of shadow sense, Sunny could only perceive what Saint perceived. And what she saw filled him with a grim sense of unease, because he couldn't help but feel that something was hiding in that darkness, or perhaps following them, getting closer and closer. No, it wasn't just a feeling. He knew it. Many powerful nightmare creatures possessed an ability to sense when someone was gazing at them. And at the moment, Sunny knew that someone, or something, was scrutinizing him, its attention cold and unfathomable. He knew it because he had sensed a vast and boundless will brush against his own. Damn it! In the next moment, something about the darkness surrounding Saint changed. Its currents were disturbed, and one of them, colossal and seemingly endless, twisted, reaching forward like an unthinkable tendril. The moment the enormous torrent of darkness entered the field of annulment, it seemed to lose a fraction of its cohesion, collapsing in on itself. But it was simply too enormous in its magnitude, and so, that only slowed it down for a moment. There was already a second gargantuan tendril reaching towards Saint from the opposite direction, as well, its roots hidden somewhere far, far below, in the ancient darkness. A moment before the tendrils reached her, an ocean of flame escaped from beneath Saint's armor, coalescing into a radiant figure. Her radiant wings opened wide, igniting with a blinding brilliance. And in that brilliance, the darkness melted like snow. 3064 Falling Light. There was a lesson Sunny had learned from Nephis many years ago, on the Forgotten Shore. It was that the fittest survived. Being the fittest did not mean being the strongest, though, it meant being the most adaptable. Adaptability reigned in the terrifying world of the nightmare spell, and versatility was what made one able to adapt to any situation, or at least as many of them as possible. It was no different in the underworld, either. Sunny was all but powerless in this vast, subterranean realm of elemental darkness. However, elemental darkness was powerless against nothingness, and it was especially powerless when exposed to the cleansing light of Neph's soul, a soul that had inherited the fire of Sun God, and was fueled by the flame of divinity. The being hiding in the darkness could hide inside an impenetrable shell of stone to protect itself from her light. But stone did not protect it against the shield of nothing wielded by Saint. That was why, during the battle above, Sunny and Nephis had chosen to augment the taciturn shadow instead of facing the jigsaw abominations directly. Now, the three of them were being attacked by the eerily colossal torrents of the darkness. The gargantuan tendrils that the darkness extended to crush Saint were too immense and powerful to be erased from existence by nothingness contained within her, but they weren't protected by great shells of stone. Which meant that they were vulnerable to light. So, when Nephis escaped from Saint's graceful figure and assumed her own G-adient form, the tendrils were destroyed. That was why Sunny had always valued versatility over raw power. There were countless deadly challenges waiting for them out there in the vast, terrifying world, and while power helped overcome them, no amount of power had any meaning if one could not express it in a variety of ways. It's like a nightmare version of rock, paper, scissors. A brilliant light ignited in the heart of the great dark abyss, illuminating its vast expanse. The radiance emanated by the beautiful winged figure was blinding, but it was still dwarfed by the sheer size of the mountain's interior. In that endless reservoir of elemental darkness, Nephis was like a firefly shining in the boundless immensity of the night sky. She plummeted through the darkness like a falling star, her pure white light surrounded by the oppressive, abyssal ocean of lightlessness. And even if there was no surface around her for a shadow to be cast upon, Sunny could still summon the shadow lantern and call upon the ancient shadows of the shadow realm. As Saint fell, hundreds of meters above Nephis, two enormous black wings sprouted from her back, opening to control her fall. They plummeted into the DROTHS of darkness. From below, colossal torrents assaulted them, being destroyed by light. From above, the immense mass of stone of the collapsing peak moved and coalesced into terrifying shapes, reaching down with 1,000 limbs. Those shapes, in turn, crumbled under a tide of annulment. Observing the nightmarish descent through Saint's eyes, Sunny could not help but feel rattled. Is this what they call being stuck between a rock and a hard place, I wonder? Although it was more like being stuck between a falling mountain and an eldritch horror born from an abyssal ocean of elemental darkness. Either way, the situation seemed like a lot to handle. However, it was not as bad as he had expected. Usually, when Sunny encountered something terrifying, things inevitably escalated, proving that there were deeper levels of terror without fail. This time, however, the confrontation between the three invaders of the underworld and the elemental darkness populating it seemingly reached a fragile state of balance. Eventually, whatever it was that attacked them seemed to learn its lesson and retracted its colossal tendrils. At the same time, the stones falling from above stopped moving in unnatural ways, turning back to a mundane avalanche of debris. Sunny should have been relieved, but he was not. If anything, it was actually the opposite. No matter how awful a foe, it was far better to see it and know what it was doing, even if that meant enduring deadly attacks. Now that the mysterious creature of darkness had taken a street EP back and hidden itself, leaving them alone, there was no telling what it was planning. The boundless expanse of true darkness was silent and calm, but that only made Sunny feel more wary, especially with his senses suppressed. However, there was nothing he could do except keep his guard up and wait. Nephis descended into the depths of the underworld, illuminating its cavernous dark expanse. Now that the danger seemed to disappear, Saint dispelled her field of annulment and followed her, the wings of shadows Sunny had summoned folding to hasten her fall. They plummeted lower and lower, crossing the middle point of the hollow mountain and swiftly approaching its roots. And as they delved deeper into the true darkness, piercing its boundless mass, Sunny felt a shiver when he noticed that Neph's brilliant light was faltering. At first, it chased the darkness away, liberating a vast sphere from its cold clutches. But as they were surrounded by a greater and greater expanse of it, the cold pressure of darkness seemed to become more unbearable, slowly causing the sphere of light to shrink. Sunny was not unfamiliar with the process. Back in Antarctica, in the endless tunnel where the heart of darkness had dwelled, light also seemed feeble and weak, barely able to push it back. But those were mundane lights, those produced by human technology. He had never seen Neph's radiance falter, and he had definitely never seen it retreat in the face of darkness. She must have felt that pressure of the vast dark depths, as well, pouring more of her essence into producing light. When even that did not seem to help, Nephis pursed her lips with a grim expression and then invoked the name of light, empowering her radiance with the help of sorcery. That seemed to work, for a while. But as they crossed the boundary of the mountain's roots and entered the middle strata of the underworld, the weight of darkness began to overwhelm her light once more. The sphere of radiance became smaller and smaller until it barely illuminated the path ahead. The rays of light stretched no more than 100 meters in every direction, which was nothing in a battle of supreme beings. Sunny was afraid that it would shrink even more, but just then, he suddenly felt deep shadows beneath them. Nephis opened her wings, straining to arrest her fall as fast as possible. But in the end, she still struck the ground with a deafening thunderclap. By the time she regained her balance, Saint had already landed near her. Sunny regained his human form and looked around, a guarded expression on his face. Well, that's something, at least. They had made it to the heart layer of the underworld alive.